Imagine a man who cried because conquering 2 million square miles wasn't enough for him. Alexander the Great cared about only one thing: conquering the world. He led his army into battle without fear of defeat, as if he could never die. And why wouldn't he think that he had been on a winning streak for 10 years? His men were tired and wanted to go home to enjoy the luxuries they had earned. But their king didn't care about wealth. He didn't even care much about ruling, only conquering. Everything was going well for him until he hit a wall in India. Alexander lost many men while fighting King Porus, one of his toughest battles. He was reportedly wounded himself while his horse was killed in combat. He kept pushing his men forward, but across the river stood another massive Indian army, fresh and ready, while his men were exhausted and weak. They begged Alexander to stop, to call it a day, to call it an empire, and return home. For once, the man who never listened to anyone was forced to agree. This was the beginning of his downfall. Known for his heavy drinking, Alexander went too far one night and became seriously ill. His ambitious generals quickly gathered around him and asked who would inherit his vast empire. Alexander replied, "To the strongest." This answer started a war among his generals that lasted nearly 50 years. The Macedonian Empire broke apart before it could truly exist. But it was never really about Macedonia for Alexander. It was always about Alexander. He became paralyzed and was declared dead by his physicians. Greek historians wrote that his body didn't decompose for 6 days, which they saw as proof that he was divine. But modern scientists believe he wasn't dead at all. They think he suffered from a neurological disorder that left him in a coma. It's very possible Alexander could hear everything, including the plots of his men, before he was buried alive. Next came the fanboy of Alexander, Gaius Julius Caesar. While Alexander wept because he had no more worlds to conquer, Caesar reportedly cried when reading about Alexander's victories. He told his men, "When he was my age, he had conquered Darius, but I have achieved nothing." Caesar idolized Alexander, and he turned out a lot like him, self-obsessed and narcissistic. Once Caesar gained enough power as a general and statesman, he began to undermine the Roman Republic. He declared himself dictator for life. He wasn't shy about it either, saying, "If you must break the law, do it to seize power. In all other cases, obey it." The Roman senators feared Caesar wanted to establish a monarchy that would destroy their authority. On March 15, 44 BC, a group of 60 senators assassinated him during a Senate meeting. They stabbed him 23 times to show their unity. The last face Caesar saw was his adopted son and trusted ally, Marcus Brutus, among his killers. Now we move to the medieval era. While it was known for the Crusaders, they were completely overshadowed by Genghis Khan, the beast from the east. He conquered twice as much land as Alexander and wanted to bring the entire world under one sword. But unlike Alexander or Caesar, he didn't see himself as a god or savior. He knew he was a tyrant and was proud of it. He once said, "The greatest happiness is to scatter your enemies, to drive them before you, to see their cities in ashes, to see those who love them weep, and to take their wives and daughters." There are many stories about his death. Historian Rashid al-Din wrote that Genghis Khan died from the bubonic plague. Marco Polo claimed he was shot while on horseback and died a few days later. Another story says he was fatally castrated by a princess from the Western Shah Empire, whom he had taken as a concubine. The reason his death wasn't well documented is because it was kept secret. Before dying, Genghis Khan ordered his followers to hide his death, since it came at the worst possible time, right in the middle of the Mongols' 20-year conquest of the Western Shah Empire. That mission mattered more to him than his own funeral. Even his corpse brought death, as his followers killed everyone along the route of his funeral procession to keep it a secret. Fast forward 5 centuries, and perhaps the greatest conqueror to ever live was Napoleon Bonaparte. The world had moved from swords and spears to artillery, and Napoleon was a genius in the art of war. Although he became emperor in the name of defending revolutionary France, his ambitions went far beyond that. His personality was probably even stranger than the rest of the great conquerors. Caesar saw himself as a messiah. Alexander thought he was a god. Genghis was a ruthless overlord. Napoleon saw himself as an artist of war. He once said, "I love power, but I love it as an artist loves his art." To him, the battlefield was a canvas, and he was the artist. His focus was unmatched, and his memory was incredible. During a campaign in 1805, when one of his officers couldn't find his division, Napoleon didn't even look at the maps. He told the officer exactly where his unit was, where it would be for the next 3 nights, its strength, and even the officer's own record. Out of an army of 200,000 men, he carried every detail in his head. He swept through Europe and the Mediterranean with victories that came fast and loud. But as his ambitions grew, so did the cost. The death toll rose, and the battles became bloodier. Eventually, he was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 and captured by the British. They didn't execute him, fearing he'd become a martyr. Instead, they placed him under house arrest with a few loyal followers in a decaying bungalow. He spent the rest of his life living in denial. When he held dinners, the men dressed in military uniforms, and the women wore evening gowns and jewelry. He wanted to pretend he was still ruling. Years of isolation took their toll, and he died on May 5, 1821. His last words were, "France, the army, the head of the army, Josephine." These were the things he loved most: his country, his military, and his wife. This was the end of the 4 great conquerors. One died from illness, another was betrayed by his own men, an arrow ended the life of Genghis Khan, and the artist of war died in captivity. Though they left the world in different ways, they all shared one thing in common: they all died still wanting more.